The morning subway car smelled like coffee, wet umbrelies, and too many people crammed into too small a space. Elena Martinez gripped the overhead rail as the train lurched through the tunnel beneath Chicago, her worn canvas messenger bag pressed against her side. Inside were textbooks she couldn't afford to replace, a laptop held together with duct tape, and the remains of a breakfast she'd split with her little brother before school. 26 years old, two jobs, night classes at community college, and still barely making rent. This was her life now. Had been for 3 years, ever since their mother's cancer treatment bills had consumed everything. The medical debt collectors didn't care that Elena was fluent in 5 languages or that she'd once had a scholarship to Northwestern. They only cared about the $15,000 she still owed. She checked her phone. 7:42. She had 18 minutes to get from the Red Line to the language center in the Loop, where she taught morning ESL classes. After that, a 4-hour gap before her evening shift translating at Cook County Hospital. Just enough time to grab food and study for her certification exam. The train stopped at Chicago Avenue. Elena squeezed through the opening doors onto the platform, joining the river of commuters flowing toward the exits. That's when she heard it. Scusi, per favore. Dov'è Michigan Avenue? The voice cut through the crowd noise, Italian accent thick, the words tumbling out with genuine confusion. Elena's feet slowed automatically, her brain switching tracks before she'd consciously decided to stop. An older man stood near the station map, gesturing helplessly at the transit poster. He wore an expensive wool coat, silver hair slightly disheveled, the look of someone who'd been wandering for a while. His hands trembled slightly as he pointed at different colored lines on the map, clearly overwhelmed. Elena knew she should keep walking. She was already cutting it close on time. This wasn't her problem. But her abuela's voice echoed in her head, the grandmother who'd raised her and her brother after their father disappeared. We help people, mija. Always. That's who we are. Elena changed direction, approaching the man with her hand already raised in a small wave. Buongiorno, she said in Italian, her accent carrying the proper Tuscan pronunciation her language professor had drilled into her. Posso aiutarla? The man's face transformed with relief. Oh, grazie a Dio. Finally, someone who speaks Italian. He clutched her arm briefly, gratitude pouring from him. I am so lost. My hotel, they told me Michigan Avenue, but these trains, these colors, I cannot understand anything. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Elena smiled warmly, already pulling out her phone to check the transit map. Don't worry, it's confusing for visitors. Where exactly on Michigan Avenue do you need to go? The Magnificent Mile? The shopping? He pulled out a crumpled hotel brochure from his coat pocket. My daughter. She lives in Milano. She told me I must see this place. But I speak no English. And everyone here, they rush past. His eyes were kind but tired, the exhaustion of a traveler far from home evident in every line of his face. Elena's heart squeezed. This could have been her abuela, lost in a foreign city, needing help. You're actually very close, Elena said gently. You'll want to take the Red Line south to Grand Avenue, then it's just a short walk east. Michigan Avenue runs right along there. I can show you on the map. She pulled up the route on her phone, zooming in to show him exactly where to go. The man leaned in, studying it carefully, asking questions in rapid Italian about which direction was east, how many stops, whether he needed to pay again. No, your transit card will work, Elena assured him. Just 5 stops. I'll write it down for you. She pulled out a small notebook from her bag, the one she used for vocabulary practice, and sketched a simple map. Drew the red line, circled his stop, added arrows pointing toward Michigan Avenue. You are un Angelo, the man said, his voice thick with emotion. An angel. What is your name? Elena. Elena Martinez. Ah, Martinez. You are Latina, but you speak such beautiful Italian. Where did you learn? University, Elena said, the familiar ache of lost opportunities pressing against her chest. I studied languages before. She trailed off. Before everything fell apart wasn't something you shared with strangers. I teach ESL now. English as a second language. A teacher. The man's face lit up. My late wife. God rest her soul, she was also a teacher. In Firenze. You remind me of her. So patient. So kind. His eyes grew misty. Thank you, Elena Martinez. You have saved this foolish old man from wandering Chicago forever. Elena laughed. You're not foolish. Chicago's transit system confuses everyone at first. Here, keep this map. And if you get lost again, just show it to someone and point. Most people will help. Grazie, grazie. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket like it was precious. God bless you, sweet girl. I hope life brings you everything you deserve. The warmth in his voice made Elena's throat tighten unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had blessed her like that? Wished good things for her without wanting something in return? Have a wonderful time shopping, she said, squeezing his hand briefly. And try the deep dish pizza before you leave. Lou Malnati's is the best. Lou Malnati's, he repeated carefully, committing it to memory. I will do this. Goodbye, Elena, thank you. She watched him head toward the southbound platform, moving more confidently now with his hand-drawn map. Then she checked her phone and cursed. 7:55. She was definitely going to be late. Elena ran for the northbound train, the brief encounter already fading from her mind as she mentally rehearsed her apology to her supervisor. 3 days later, Elena was restocking textbooks in the Language Center's small library when her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, appeared in the doorway. Elena, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about a job opportunity. Elena looked up, confused. A job? I didn't apply anywhere. Well, he seems very insistent, professional looking, waiting in the conference room. Wiping dust from her hands, Elena followed Mrs. Chen down the hallway. Through the glass door of the conference room, she could see a man in an expensive charcoal suit, dark hair perfectly styled, examining the ESL posters on the walls with what looked like genuine interest. He turned when she entered, and Elena's breath caught. He was striking in a way that made you look twice. Sharp jawline, dark brown eyes that seemed to calculate everything they touched, the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. Mid-30s, maybe. The suit probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Miss Martinez? His voice was smooth, carrying just the faintest hint of an Italian accent. My name is Dante Bellini. Thank you for meeting with me. Elena shook his offered hand, noting the firm grip, the expensive watch. Mrs. Chen said this is about a job? Yes, please, sit. He gestured to the conference table, waiting until she was seated before taking his own chair. I represent Bellini Import Solutions. We specialize in Italian goods, olive oil, wine, specialty foods, distributed throughout the Midwest. We're expanding our operations and need someone with specific language skills. He slid a business card across the table. Simple black cardstock with silver lettering. Looked expensive. I'm sorry, but I don't understand, Elena said carefully. How did you even know about me? I haven't applied to any import companies. You were recommended, Dante said smoothly. By someone who was very impressed with your kindness and language abilities. Recommended by who? A colleague who recently visited Chicago. He mentioned encountering a young woman who spoke flawless Italian and went out of her way to help him despite clearly being in a hurry. He was quite touched by the experience. The old man, the tourist at the subway station. Elena's eyes widened. The man I helped at the transit station? He worked for you? My supplier coordinator, yes. Antonio Russo. He's based in Firenze, was here evaluating potential retail partnerships. Dante's expression remained neutral, professional. He couldn't stop talking about the teacher who helped him navigate the subway system. Said you spoke Italian like a native and showed genuine compassion for a confused traveler. Elena's cheeks warmed. I just gave him directions. It wasn't anything special. In my experience, Miss Martinez, kindness is always special, especially in a city where most people wouldn't have stopped. Dante leaned forward slightly. Antonio was so impressed that he insisted I contact you. We've been looking for a translator for months, someone who can handle supplier negotiations, contract translations, cultural mediation between our Italian partners and American clients. The position requires fluency in Italian and English, ideally with some business background. It sounded legitimate, professional. The kind of opportunity Elena had dreamed about before her mother got sick. I don't have business experience, she said honestly. Just teaching and medical translation. I never finished my degree. But you understand contract language? Legal terminology? In Spanish and Italian, yes. I translate medical consent forms and patient documents at the hospital. Legal language is similar. Dante nodded, as if this confirmed something. The position would be part-time initially, 20 hours per week. Flexible scheduling around your current jobs. $40 per hour to start, with potential for full-time placement and benefits after a probationary period. Elena's mind stuttered. $40 per hour? That was more than double what she made teaching, almost triple her hospital rate. That seems very generous for part-time work. We pay for expertise and discretion, Dante said. Our suppliers are family businesses, generations old, very traditional. They value personal relationships and cultural understanding. Someone who treats them with respect, speaks their language properly, understands their perspective, that's invaluable to us. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, sliding it across the table. Sample contracts, supplier agreements, correspondence we'd need translated. Take a look. See if it's something you'd be comfortable with. Elena opened the folder, scanning the documents. They looked legitimate. Import agreements for olive oil from Tuscany, wine from Piedmont, cheese from Sicily. Technical language, but nothing she couldn't handle. Why me? She asked, looking up. Surely there are professional translators with more experience. Because Antonio trusted you, Dante said simply. In our business, trust is everything. We work with family operations that have been around for centuries. They don't respond well to cold, corporate translators who treat them like transaction numbers. They need someone warm, genuine, someone who reminds them why they got into this business in the first place. He paused. Antonio said you reminded him of his late wife. That's the highest compliment he could give. It means he felt seen, respected, cared for. That's what we need in a translator. It made sense. More sense than Elena wanted to admit. This could change everything. Could mean actually paying off debt, keeping Marco in school, maybe even finishing her own degree. But something whispered caution in the back of her mind. Opportunities this good didn't just fall into your lap because you gave a tourist directions. Can I think about it? Elena asked. It's a big decision. Of course. Dante stood, extending his hand again. Take a few days. Look over the sample work. If you're interested, call the number on the card. We can discuss details, set up a trial project, see if it's a good fit. Thank you. I'll definitely consider it. As Dante reached the door, he paused. Miss Martinez? What you did for Antonio? Stopping when you were clearly late, taking time to make sure he understood, even drawing him a map? That showed character. Don't underestimate the value of that. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the conference room with a folder full of contracts and a business card that felt heavier than it should. She sat there for a long moment staring at the elegant script. Dante Bellini, CEO. This was legitimate, wasn't it? A real company, real work, recommended by a man she'd helped. Nothing suspicious about that. So why did her hands shake slightly as she tucked the business card into her wallet? Elena didn't call that day, or the next. She went through her routines, teaching her morning classes, translating at the hospital, helping Marco with homework in their tiny apartment. But the business card stayed in her wallet, and the folder of sample contracts sat on her desk, calling to her every time she calculated how many more months until they'd be evicted if something didn't change. On the fourth evening, Marco came home from school with a permission slip for a science field trip. $50. Due in 2 weeks. I know we probably can't afford it, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. It's okay. I can just do the makeup assignment. Elena looked at her little brother, at the resignation in his 14-year-old face, at the way he'd learned not to ask for things because the answer was always no. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number on Dante Bellini's card. He answered on the second ring. Miss Martinez, I was hoping you'd call. I'd like to try a trial project, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. See if this is really a good fit. Excellent. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Say, 2 o'clock? I'll have Antonio call in from Firenze. He'll be thrilled to work with you. I'll be there. Perfect. I'll text you the address. And Miss Martinez? His voice warmed slightly. Thank you for giving us a chance. I think you'll find this partnership very rewarding. After he hung up, Elena sat staring at her phone, at the address that had just arrived. River North, one of the nicer business districts. This was good, she told herself. Legitimate work, decent pay, recommended by someone she'd genuinely helped. So why did it feel like she was stepping off a cliff into darkness she couldn't see the bottom of? Elena gave Marco the $50 for his field trip, ignored the voice whispering warnings in the back of her mind, and told herself that sometimes opportunity really did come from unexpected places. She had no idea that the lost tourist she'd helped had been testing her, that every word she'd spoken, every gesture of kindness, had been carefully observed and reported back. That Antonio Russo wasn't just a supplier coordinator, but Dante Bellini's most trusted advisor. That the entire encounter had been orchestrated to evaluate whether Elena Martinez was exactly the kind of person they needed. Honest, kind, trustworthy. Someone who helped strangers without asking for anything in return. Someone who could be trusted with secrets that would get her killed if she ever betrayed them. Elena went to bed that night, believing she'd simply done a good deed that led to a lucky break. She had no idea her life had just changed forever. The offices of Bellini Import Solutions occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in River North. Elena stood in the marble lobby, smoothing down her only professional blazer, the one she'd bought secondhand for job interviews that never went anywhere. The building's directory listed law firms, consulting agencies, financial advisors, legitimate businesses with legitimate people. She was being paranoid. This was just a job. The elevator opened onto a reception area that screamed understated wealth. Cream-colored walls, modern furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. A woman in her 40s sat behind a sleek desk, her smile professional but not unkind. Elena Martinez? Mr. Bellini is expecting you. Conference room 2, down the hall, on your left. Elena followed the directions, her footsteps muffled by expensive carpet. Through glass walls, she glimpsed offices where people worked at computers, talked on phones, looked exactly like any other business professionals. See? Normal. Completely normal. Dante stood when she entered the conference room, gesturing to a chair at the polished table. Today he wore a navy suit, his dark hair swept back, those calculating eyes assessing her in a way that made her spine straighten automatically. "Miss Martinez, thank you for coming." He pressed a button on the phone in the center of the table. "Antonio, are you there?" "Si." The familiar warm voice crackled through the speaker, and Elena felt herself relax slightly. "Elena, my angel from the subway, Dante tells me you have agreed to work with us. I am so happy." "Hello, Antonio." Elena couldn't help smiling. "I'm glad your shopping trip went well." "Magnifico. I bought so many things for my daughter. And I found Lou Malnati's. The pizza. Just as you said. The best." His enthusiasm was infectious. "Now, we will work together, yes? I have so many suppliers who will love you. You speak Italian like you were born in Firenze, not Chicago." For the next 90 minutes, they discussed contracts. Antonio explained the relationships with various family businesses across Italy, producers who'd been making olive oil or wine or cheese for generations. Dante provided context about the American side, the restaurants, and specialty stores they supplied, the logistics of import regulations. Elena translated sample documents, asking questions about technical terms, clarifying legal language. The work was exactly what Dante had described: contract translation with cultural nuance, nothing suspicious, nothing that raised red flags. "You're a natural at this," Dante said when Antonio finally signed off to handle another call. "The way you caught that clause about harvest timing, most translators would have missed the cultural significance." "My professor used to say translation is about meaning, not just words," Elena said, closing her notebook. "If you don't understand the context, you can't convey the real message." "Exactly." Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I'd like to offer you a trial period. 4 weeks, 20 hours per week, the rate we discussed. If it works well for both of us, we convert to a permanent position with benefits. 4 weeks, $3,200. Elena's rent, utilities, groceries, Marco's field trip, and maybe, finally, a payment to the debt collectors that was more than the minimum." "I accept," she said. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Satisfaction? Relief? It passed too quickly to identify. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant draw up the paperwork. You can start tomorrow if you're available." "Tomorrow works." As Elena gathered her things, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. The professional businessman disappeared, replaced by something harder, colder. "Excuse me," he said, his voice clipped. "I need to take this." He stepped into the hallway, but the glass walls weren't soundproof. Elena heard fragments as she packed her notebook. "Told you to handle it quietly." Dante's voice, low and dangerous. "Don't care what excuses he has. The money was due yesterday." A pause. "Then make sure he understands what happens when people don't pay their debts to me." Elena's hands stilled. The tone, the words, the barely contained violence in that voice didn't match the polite businessman who'd been discussing olive oil contracts 60 seconds ago. Dante returned, his expression smooth again, the mask firmly back in place. "Sorry about that. Supplier issue. Some people don't understand that agreements have consequences." "Of course," Elena said, not trusting herself to say more. But as she rode the elevator down, unease coiled in her stomach. The words echoed. "Make sure he understands what happens when people don't pay their debts to me." That wasn't how legitimate businessmen talked about late payments. The first 2 weeks passed smoothly. Elena translated contracts, participated in video calls with Italian suppliers who adored her accent and warmth, and worked from home most days. The money appeared in her bank account exactly when promised. Everything seemed perfectly normal, except for the small things that weren't. Like the day she arrived at the office to drop off documents and saw 2 men in the lobby. They stood too still, eyes tracking every person who entered, hands resting near their waistbands in a way that suggested weapons. When they saw Dante emerge from the elevator, they straightened, deference clear in their posture. "Boss?" one of them murmured. "Boss. Not Mr. Bellini, not sir. Boss." Or the evening she stayed late to finish a rush translation and overheard Dante's voice from his office, speaking rapid Italian into the phone. She understood enough to catch words that made her blood run cold. "Shipment arrives Thursday at the warehouse. Make sure the inspection is clean. If customs asks questions, you know what to say. No paperwork trail." Elena had left quietly, her translation only half finished, telling herself there were legitimate reasons for avoiding paperwork trails. Tax purposes, maybe. Import regulations could be complicated. But the doubts kept accumulating. The way people tensed when Dante entered a room. The phone calls he took privately, stepping out of earshot. The afternoon she'd accidentally opened the wrong file on the shared drive and found spreadsheets with numbers that didn't match any of the legitimate contracts she'd been translating. She should quit. Should walk away before she learned something she couldn't unknow. But every time she considered it, she thought about Marco's permission slip, now proudly displayed on their refrigerator. The debt payment she'd made, the first one in months that was more than interest. The way her brother had smiled when she'd bought actual groceries instead of ramen and canned soup. This job was saving them. Could she really give it up based on suspicions and overheard phone conversations? The answer came on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks into her trial period. Elena had stayed late at the office to video conference with a supplier in Sicily. When she finished, the reception area was empty, the sky outside dark with winter clouds. She gathered her things, heading for the elevator. That's when she heard the shouting. "I told you, I don't have it. I need more time." A man's voice, desperate and terrified. "You've had 3 months." Dante's voice, ice cold. "Time's up." The voices came from behind a closed door at the end of the hall. The one marked private storage that Elena had been told was just file archives. She should leave. Should walk straight to the elevator and pretend she'd heard nothing. Instead, she moved closer. Through the small gap where the door hadn't closed completely, Elena could see inside. A man knelt on the floor, his face bloody, hands raised in supplication. Dante stood over him, 2 other men flanking him. Large men with the build of enforcers. "Please," the kneeling man begged. "My daughter, she needs surgery. That's where the money went. I swear I'll pay you back. I just need—" "I don't care about your daughter," Dante interrupted, his tone conversational. "I care that you borrowed $50,000 from my organization and haven't made a single payment. Do you know what that looks like to others who owe me money? Like weakness. Like I'm someone who can be taken advantage of. I'll pay double, triple. Just give me 6 more months." Dante nodded to one of the enforcers. The man moved forward, and Elena heard the sickening sound of fist meeting flesh. The debtor crumpled, crying out in pain. "You'll pay what you owe by Friday," Dante said calmly. "Or the next time we meet. It won't be your face. It'll be your daughter's. Am I clear?" Elena's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She stumbled backward, her bag hitting the wall with a soft thud. The sound was barely audible, but in that moment of violence, it was enough. The door jerked open. One of the enforcers stood there, eyes narrowing when he saw Elena frozen in the hallway. "Boss," he called over his shoulder. "We got a problem." Dante appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable when he saw her. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Elena's heart hammered so violently she was certain everyone could hear it. "Miss Martinez." Dante's voice was perfectly calm. "I thought you'd left for the evening." The supplier call ran late. I was just—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't pretend she hadn't seen and heard everything. Dante stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. "Let's talk in my office." It wasn't a request. Elena's legs moved automatically, following him down the hall while her mind screamed at her to run. They passed the empty reception desk, entered his corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Dante closed the door and gestured to a chair. Elena remained standing. "You saw something you shouldn't have," he said simply. "I didn't see anything. I don't know what you're talking about." The lie came out too fast, too shaky. "Elena." The use of her first name made her flinch. "Don't insult my intelligence. You heard the conversation. Saw enough to understand what kind of business I really run." Her throat was so dry she could barely speak. "Import and export. That's what you said." "Among other things." Dante moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, as if they were discussing weather instead of violence and extortion. "The olive oil and wine? That's real. Legitimate business that I'm quite proud of, actually. But it's not how I built this empire." Empire. Not company. Empire. "I want to quit," Elena whispered. "I'll finish out the week, but then I'm done. I won't tell anyone what I saw, I can't work here." "Unfortunately, it's not that simple anymore." Dante turned to face her. "You've been translating for 3 weeks. You have access to supplier names, contact information, shipping schedules. You know how our operations work, who our partners are. That information is valuable to my competitors, and dangerous to me if it gets into the wrong hands." The implication hung in the air like a threat. "I would never," Elena started. "I know you wouldn't intentionally betray me," Dante interrupted. "You're not built that way, but people can be persuaded, threatened, tortured for information, even when they don't want to give it up." Terror flooded through Elena's veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've seen too much to just walk away." He moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. "But I'm also saying I don't want to hurt you, Elena. Despite what you just witnessed, I don't enjoy violence. I use it when necessary to maintain order, to show that I keep my word. But you've done nothing except be exactly who I hired you to be. Honest, competent, kind to an old man who was testing whether you could be trusted." The words hit like a physical blow. "Testing? Antonio? That whole thing at the subway was carefully orchestrated to evaluate your character," Dante confirmed. "I needed someone with your language skills, but more importantly, I needed someone loyal. Someone who wouldn't sell me out the first time things got complicated. So I had Antonio pretend to be a lost tourist and see how you'd react when no one was watching, when there was no benefit to being kind." Elena's legs gave out. She sank into the chair behind her, the betrayal washing over her in waves. "You manipulated me. From the very beginning." "I vetted you," Dante corrected. "The same way I vet everyone who works for me, and you passed because you're genuinely good, Elena. That's rare in my world. Valuable." "I don't want to be valuable to you." The words burst out, sharp with fear and anger. "I just wanted a job so I could feed my brother and pay my rent. I didn't ask to be pulled into whatever this is." "I know." Dante's expression softened slightly. "And I'm sorry you saw what you saw tonight. That wasn't meant for your eyes. But we can't undo it. So now we have to decide what comes next." Elena looked up at him, this man who'd seemed like her salvation and was actually her nightmare. "What do you want from me?" "Keep working for me. Keep translating. Pretend tonight never happened." He sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "In exchange, I protect you. Anyone who comes looking for information finds nothing. You and your brother stay safe. You get paid well for legitimate work. Life continues as normal." "And if I say no?" The silence stretched for several heartbeats. "Then we have a problem," Dante said quietly. "Because I can't let you walk out of here knowing what you know. Not when my enemies would pay a fortune for the information in your head. The threat was clear, even though he hadn't stated it explicitly. She could cooperate, or she could disappear. Elena thought about Marco, about coming home to find their apartment empty, about her little brother wondering why his sister never came back. She thought about the debt collectors who would descend on him, about him ending up in foster care, alone and terrified. "How do I know you won't hurt me anyway?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Once I'm no longer useful?" "Because I keep my word," Dante said. "Always. Ask anyone who works for me. I'm ruthless with enemies and competitors, but I protect my people absolutely. You're my people now, Elena, whether you meant to be or not." She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but the rational part of her brain recognized the impossible position she was in. She'd stumbled into something dangerous, and now the only way out was through. "I need guarantees," Elena heard herself say. "My brother can never be touched. Whatever happens to me, he stays safe. Gets money for school. Protected." Dante's eyebrows rose slightly. "Agreed. What else?" "I only translate legitimate documents. No money laundering schemes, no drug shipments, nothing that makes me complicit in actually hurting people. The import business is real and legal. That work continues as it has been." Elena swallowed hard. "And if I see something else I shouldn't? If I accidentally learn things?" "You tell me immediately," Dante said. "Don't try to handle it yourself. Don't try to be a hero. Just tell me, and we'll deal with it together. Honesty keeps you safe in my world, Elena. Secrets and betrayal get people killed." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She actually believed he meant every word. "Okay," Elena whispered. "I'll stay. I'll work for you. But I want everything about Marco's protection in writing, legal documents, money in a trust he can access if something happens to me." "Done." Dante extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Elena stared at that outstretched hand, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Then she reached out and shook it, sealing her fate with the touch of his warm, calloused palm. "We have an agreement." Something flashed in Dante's eyes. Relief? Satisfaction? "Good. Go home, Elena. Get some rest. We'll handle the paperwork tomorrow." She stood on shaking legs, gathering her bag. At the door, she paused without turning around. That man, the one who owed you money, his daughter. "We'll get her surgery," Dante said quietly. "I'm not a monster, Elena. I'll give him an extension, restructure his debt. But he needed to be afraid first. Fear is what keeps order in my world." Elena left without responding, her mind reeling. She took the elevator down, walked through the lobby past the men who worked as security or enforcers or whatever Dante called them, and emerged onto the cold Chicago street. The city looked exactly the same as it had 3 hours ago. Cars passing, people hurrying home from work. The ordinary world continuing while Elena's entire reality had just shattered and reformed into something unrecognizable. She pulled out her phone and called Marco. "Hey," her brother answered. "You on your way home? I'm starving." "Yeah, I'll grab pizza, the good kind from Gino's." Because they could afford it now. Because she was being paid by a criminal organization and had just agreed to stay trapped in their world. "Awesome! How was work?" Elena looked up at the glass tower behind her, at the 20th floor where Dante Bellini ran an empire built on violence disguised as legitimate business. "Complicated," she said. "Work was complicated." She hung up and started walking, the cold November wind cutting through her jacket. Somewhere in the last 3 weeks, she'd stopped being Elena Martinez, ESL teacher and medical translator. Now she was something else. She just didn't know what yet. Behind her, 20 floors up, Dante stood at his office window watching her small figure disappear into the city crowd. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Antonio. She stayed? Dante typed back. She stayed. I told you she would. That girl has steel in her spine. She'll be good for you. Dante smiled slightly. Antonio was rarely wrong about people. He'd said Elena Martinez was special from the moment she'd stopped to help a confused tourist at a subway station, not knowing she was being evaluated for something far more dangerous than translation work. She'd passed every test, even this final one, where she'd seen the violence and chosen survival over righteousness. Now, she belonged to him. And Dante protected what was his with absolute ruthlessness. Elena Martinez was about to learn that working for the Mafia meant more than just translating contracts. It meant becoming part of a family that would kill for her and expect the same loyalty in return, whether she was ready for that or not. 2 months changed everything and nothing. Elena still taught her morning ESL classes, still lived in the same cramped apartment with Marco. But now she carried a second phone, the one Dante had given her with a single number programmed in. For emergencies, he'd said, if anyone threatens you, if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. The paperwork had been executed within 24 hours. A trust fund in Marco's name, accessible when he turned 18 or immediately if something happened to Elena. Legal documents guaranteeing his safety, signed by Dante and witnessed by lawyers who asked no questions. Her brother would be protected. That was what mattered. The translation work continued exactly as before. Contracts with olive oil producers in Tuscany, wine distributors in Piedmont, cheesemakers in Sicily. All legitimate, all legal. Dante kept his word about that. But Elena now understood what existed beneath the surface. The storage room was where debts were collected. The men in expensive suits who visited Dante's office weren't all business partners. Some were enforcers. Some were associates from other crime families. Some were people paying protection money disguised as consulting fees. She learned to recognize the signs. When Dante's jaw tightened in a certain way, someone was about to have a very bad day. When he spoke, in rapid Italian on his phone, switching to dialect she could barely follow, violence was being discussed. When certain visitors arrived, always in pairs, always armed, serious business was being conducted. Elena kept her head down and her mouth shut, translated contracts, smiled at Antonio during video calls, pretended she didn't hear the things that happened behind closed doors. It was working. They had an arrangement, and both sides were holding up their end. Until the night everything fell apart. Elena was leaving the office late on a Thursday evening, another rush translation completed. The winter sun had set hours ago, the city dark except for streetlights and car headlights streaming past. She was halfway to the subway station when she noticed the car, black sedan, tinted windows, driving slowly alongside her. Not unusual in River North, where expensive cars were common, except this one matched her pace, staying exactly parallel as she walked. Elena's heart rate kicked up. She told herself she was paranoid. This was a busy street. Nothing would happen on a busy street. The car pulled ahead, stopped at the curb 20 feet in front of her. 2 men got out. They looked wrong. That was Elena's first thought. Wrong clothes. Too casual, too rumpled. Wrong posture. Aggressive. Predatory. These weren't Dante's people. His men moved with controlled precision, wore expensive suits, projected authority. These men projected hunger. Elena Martinez? The taller one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk to you about your employer. Every instinct screamed danger. Elena's hand dove into her bag, fingers closing around the emergency phone. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, backing away. I work for an import company. I'm just a translator. Don't play stupid. The second man circled left, cutting off her retreat. You work for Dante Bellini, which means you know things. Things people would pay good money to learn. They moved closer, herding her toward the alley between buildings. Elena's thumb found the power button on the emergency phone, pressed it 3 times rapidly. The distress signal Dante had shown her. "I translate olive oil contracts," Elena said, her voice shaking. "That's all. I don't know anything about his other business." "Bullshit." The tall man grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "You've been working there for 2 months. You've seen things. Heard things. We know how Bellini operates. He doesn't hire people who stay in the dark." They were dragging her toward the alley now. Elena struggled, her bag falling, contents spilling onto the sidewalk. She opened her mouth to scream. The tall man's hand clamped over her face. "Make a sound and your little brother Marco has an accident on his way home from school tomorrow. Understand?" Ice flooded Elena's veins. They knew about Marco, had been watching him, following him. 14 years old and already a target because of her choices. She stopped, struggling. "Smart girl," the man said, releasing her mouth but maintaining his grip on her arm. "Now, we're going to take a little ride. Ask you some questions about Bellini's operations. Import schedules, warehouse locations, who he's meeting with. You cooperate, give us what we need, and you go home safe. Your brother never knows anything happened." They reached the alley entrance. The second man pulled out a roll of duct tape, reaching for her wrists. That's when the first gunshot cracked through the air. The man with the duct tape dropped screaming, his knee exploding in a spray of blood. The tall man spun, releasing Elena, his hand going inside his jacket for a weapon. He never got it out. 3 more shots, impossibly fast and precise. The tall man crumpled, his gun clattering to the pavement unfired. Elena stumbled backward, her ears ringing, unable to process what had just happened. Through the haze of shock, figures emerged from the shadows. 4 men, all armed, moving with military efficiency. And behind them, striding down the sidewalk like an avenging angel, came Dante Bellini. He wore a black coat over his suit, his face a mask of cold fury that made Elena's knees weak. He barely glanced at the 2 men bleeding on the ground before his eyes found her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was steady, controlled, but something violent simmered beneath the surface. Elena couldn't speak, could only shake her head. Dante's gaze swept over her, cataloging her torn sleeve, the bruises already forming on her arm where she'd been grabbed, the scattered contents of her purse. His jaw tightened until she could see the muscle jumping. "Get her to the car," he told one of his men. Then, to the wounded attacker writhing on the ground, "Who sent you?" "Fuck you, Bellini!" The man's curse cut off in a scream as Dante's foot connected with his shattered knee. "Wrong answer. Try again." Dante's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "Who sent you?" Through her shock, Elena watched this transformation. The professional businessman she'd worked with for 2 months had vanished completely. This was someone else. Someone capable of cruelty without hesitation. "Marchetti!" the wounded man gasped. "Victor Marchetti. He wants to know about your supplier routes, your shipping schedules. Says if he can't compete with your legitimate business, he'll destroy it." "Where is Marchetti now?" "I don't know, I swear. We're just hired muscle. He contacts us. We don't contact him." Dante nodded to one of his men. "Take them both. Find out everything they know. Then make sure Marchetti understands what happens when someone touches what's mine." Strong hands guided Elena away from the alley, toward a black SUV idling at the curb. She let herself be led, her body moving automatically while her mind struggled to catch up with the violence, the gunshots, the blood. Dante slid into the back seat beside her, and the SUV pulled away smoothly, as if they hadn't just left 2 men bleeding in an alley. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Elena turned to stare at him. Safe? They knew about Marco. They were going to hurt Marco if I didn't cooperate. They won't get the chance. Dante pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. "I'm sending people to your apartment right now. Marco will be picked up from school tomorrow by my security. He stays protected until this is handled." "Handled how?" Elena's voice rose, hysteria creeping in. You're going to kill them? Kill whoever this Marchetti person is? That's your solution? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. Marchetti is a rival who's been trying to undermine my operations for months. He crossed a line tonight. That has consequences. This is insane! Elena pressed her hands against her face, trying to stop the shaking. I gave directions to a tourist, and now people are trying to kidnap me and my brothers in danger, and you're talking about killing people like it's normal. Elena. Dante's hand closed around her wrist, pulling her hands away from her face, forcing her to look at him. This is my world, the world you're part of now. I warned you that knowledge was dangerous. I told you that people would try to use you to get to me. Tonight proved I was right. Then let me go. The words burst out, desperate and raw. Give me money, fake IDs for me and Marco, and we'll disappear. You'll never hear from us again. No. The single word was absolute. You don't get to decide that, Elena said, tears burning her eyes. This is my life, my brother's life. And you're alive because I got there in time, Dante interrupted, his grip tightening. Do you understand what would have happened if I'd been 5 minutes later? They would have taken you somewhere private, tortured you for information you don't even have, then killed you anyway because dead witnesses don't talk. And when that didn't work, they would have taken Marco. The scenario painted itself in Elena's mind with horrifying clarity. She closed her eyes against the images. You're mine to protect, Dante continued, his voice dropping lower. I made that promise when you agreed to work for me. No one touches you. No one threatens you. And anyone who tries learns why people fear the Bellini name. I didn't ask for this, Elena whispered. I know. His hand moved from her wrist to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But you have it anyway. My protection, my resources, my absolute commitment to keeping you and your brother safe. Elena opened her eyes, finding his face inches from hers. In the dim light of the moving car, Dante's features were softer than she'd ever seen them. The cold fury had melted into something else, something that looked almost like concern. Why? She asked. Why does it matter so much? I'm just a translator who stumbled into your world. Why not just let me go? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his thumb still tracing her cheekbone in a gesture that felt far, too intimate. Because Antonio was right, he finally said. You're special, kind and honest in a world where those qualities are rare and valuable. You stopped to help an old man when you were late, when you had nothing to gain. You work hard, sacrifice for your brother, never complain even when life is unfair. He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. And because when you look at me, you see a person instead of just a monster. Even after witnessing what I do, what I'm capable of, you still see the man underneath. That's something I haven't experienced in a very long time. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Elena's breath caught at the honesty in his voice, the yearning beneath his words. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. I'm terrified of you, Elena admitted quietly. Of what you do, the violence, the power you have over people's lives. You should be. Dante didn't try to deny it. Fear keeps you cautious, keeps you safe. But I also... Elena stopped herself, not sure how to articulate the complicated truth. When you look at me, you don't see someone helpless or stupid. You see me as capable, as an equal, even in a world where I have no power. That's what? Dante prompted when she trailed off. That's why I'm still here, Elena finished. Not just because I'm trapped, but because part of me wants to stay, to understand who you really are beneath the reputation and the violence, and that terrifies me even more than the guns and the threats. The SUV pulled up in front of Elena's apartment building. Through the window, she could see two of Dante's men already positioned at the entrance. Protection. Guards. A reminder that her life would never be normal again. "Marco's inside," Dante said, checking his phone. "My people secured him 20 minutes ago. He thinks they're friends of mine stopping by to say hello. He's safe, Elena. I promise." Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. She reached for the door handle, but Dante's voice stopped her. "This isn't over. Marchetti will retaliate when he learns what happened to his men. Until he's dealt with, you and Marco need enhanced protection." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't go anywhere without my people nearby. It means Marco gets escorted to and from school. It means you move carefully and don't take chances." Dante's expression hardened. "And it means I'm going to end this threat permanently, so you can sleep at night without wondering when the next attack is coming." Elena looked at this man who'd entered her life disguised as opportunity and revealed himself as danger. Who'd manipulated her, trapped her, and now protected her with a ferocity that felt almost like devotion. "Don't kill anyone unless you absolutely have to," she said quietly. "Please. I know that's naive and stupid in your world, but I'm asking anyway." Dante studied her face, something like wonder in his eyes. "Most people in your position would be demanding more violence, not less. They'd want revenge, want to see their attackers suffer." "I want my brother safe," Elena said. "Everything else is just noise." "I'll handle it my way," Dante said, which was an agreement but wasn't refusal either. "But I'll take your wishes into consideration. That's more than I'd do for anyone else." Elena got out of the car, her legs shaky but functional. She made it 3 steps before turning back, leaning down to the open window. "Dante? Thank you for getting there in time. For caring enough to come yourself instead of just sending your people." His expression softened. "Always. When you're in danger, I come. That's non-negotiable." The SUV pulled away, leaving Elena standing on the sidewalk with guards who pretended not to watch her, but absolutely did. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, pushed open the door, and found Marco on the couch with 2 of Dante's men, playing video games like this was a normal Thursday evening. "Elena, these are Dante's friends, Tony and Mike. They brought pizza." Marco grinned, oblivious to the danger he'd been in. "Dante said they were in the neighborhood and wanted to check in. Cool, right?" "So cool," Elena managed, her smile feeling like it might crack her face. "Thanks, guys." Tony, the older of the 2 guards, met her eyes with understanding. "Boss wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. We'll be nearby if anything comes up. Anything at all." Translation: they'd be guarding the building all night. Would continue guarding it until Dante decided the threat was eliminated. Elena retreated to her bedroom, closing the door before the shaking started in earnest. She sat on the edge of her bed, arms wrapped around herself, replaying the evening in fractured pieces. The alley, the hands grabbing her, the gunshots. Dante's cold fury and unexpected tenderness. "You're mine to protect." The words echoed in her mind, possessive, absolute, terrifying, and somehow, despite everything, not entirely unwelcome. Elena pulled out her real phone, not the emergency one, and stared at the number Dante had programmed in months ago. The direct line she was supposed to use only for work questions. She typed a message before she could talk herself out of it. "Are you okay? After tonight?" The response came within seconds. "I'm fine. Are you?" Elena considered lying, considered saying yes, everything's great, totally not traumatized by witnessing violence and almost being kidnapped. Instead, she typed the truth. "No, but I will be. Thank you again." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about next steps. You're safe tonight, Elena. I give you my word. She believed him. That was the most terrifying realization of all. Dante Bellini had manipulated her, trapped her in his world, exposed her to violence she'd never imagined. But he'd also protected her without hesitation, shown her glimpses of the man beneath the monster, and somehow made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. Elena set down her phone and lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling while voices from the living room drifted through. Marco laughing, the guards keeping him distracted and safe. She'd made choices, some forced, some willing. And those choices had led her here, to a life balanced precariously between two worlds. The question was, which world did she really belong to now? And was she brave enough to find out? 20 blocks away, in his penthouse office, Dante stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. His phone sat on the desk behind him, Elena's message still displayed on the screen. No, but I will be. Thank you again. Her honesty, her resilience, the fact that she'd checked on him after nearly being kidnapped herself. Antonio had been right. Elena Martinez was special, worth protecting, worth keeping close even when it complicated everything. Dante's other phone buzzed, his head of security. Marchetti's location confirmed. Permission to move? Dante thought about Elena's request. Don't kill anyone unless you absolutely have to. In his world, eliminating threats permanently was standard procedure. Quick, efficient, final. But Elena had asked. Had looked at him with those dark eyes and requested mercy, even for people who'd tried to hurt her. He typed back, disable his operation, destroy his resources, send the message. But Marchetti lives unless he escalates. We do this her way first. His security chief's response came after a pause. Understood. This is about the translator? This is about protecting what's mine. Dante pocketed the phone and returned his gaze to the city. Somewhere out there, Elena was lying awake, processing the violence she'd witnessed, adjusting to her new reality. She didn't know it yet, but she'd already changed him, made him consider alternatives to his usual brutal efficiency, made him want to be the man she saw when she looked past his reputation to the person underneath. Dante Bellini had built an empire on fear and ruthlessness, had never hesitated to do whatever was necessary to maintain power and protect his interests. But for Elena Martinez, the woman who'd helped a lost tourist without knowing she was being tested, who'd chosen kindness when she had nothing to gain, for her, he'd try to be better. Even if better was just slightly less monstrous. It was a start. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.